Welcome to the Atlantic Current. I'm Vince Martin from Wall Street, Maine, here as always with Tull McAdoo from the Irish Politics newsletter. Our first topic today, Tull, we are witnessing the return of Taco Trump, aren't we?
Yes, Taco Trump always chickens out. It's a big deal because he looks to be chickening out on his policy around Iran. Taco Trump has become such a feature now that Deutsche Bank has developed a Taco Trump pressure index model. Okay.
Yeah, that's really funny that they went and did a model, because all you really need to do is just look at the S&P 500 index. Oh, does the line go down? Yeah, Taco Trump showing up.
Okay, right.
That's been it for
It does sound quite convoluted. The index combines his approval ratings, which is, is a massive ego, of course.
Right.
Inflation expectations, which there's bad news coming out of Europe and the United States. In the US Treasury said they're going to hit 4.3% maybe, and the model in Ireland I think is around 3.5%, right? That's inflation expectations. Stock market performance, bang on the money there, Vince. And Treasury yields, Vincent. What exactly are Treasury yields?
Essentially, it's the interest rate the market is setting to lend money to the United States government. It's tied to all sorts of factors. Inflation expectations are one of them, things like that. Yeah, to me, again, that really does sound a little overcomplicated. I kind of get where Deutsche Bank is going, and I assume they probably need to dress it up a bit. But Trump is vaguely aware of that stuff, but we just have so much evidence that when the stock market turns down, he changes his behavior. And this was going back to the first term. It was less a foreign policy thing and more an economic thing. And even the TACO acronym was coined by a Financial Times columnist last year about his tariff negotiations. And now it's kind of bleeding into foreign policy too, right?
There's a 15-point plan, Vincent, but these guys are not backing down. There's something called the Mosaic strategy that Iran are using. And essentially, they've divided up the country into 31 different, independent Revolutionary Guard units. And they all act essentially independent of each other. We've said this before on the podcast that even if one group wants to negotiate, there's no 30 other groups that may not want to negotiate.
Yeah.
Okay. And they have their foot on the neck of the world economy. And I just don't see them, giving up that leverage, as you'd say in the United States.
No, I don't think so.
They have the world economy where they want it.
I think leverage aside, the 15-point plan that you discussed, the U.S. is saying you have to give up all your uranium, you have to allow inspections, you have to open the Strait of Hormuz, which is obviously a big near-term goal for the U.S. because Iran's blockade of the strait is basically what's driving oil prices crazy and creating all this macro havoc. And Iran also is subject to pretty severe limitations on its ballistic missiles. In return, the U.S. would give it an end to sanctions and support for civilian nuclear power. Yeah, I don't think Iran necessarily wants to take that deal with the leverage it has. But you get back to the core concern that they're going to have, which is, how do we trust any of this? They put in a ceasefire after the 12-day war last year. It didn't even last 12 months. So if you're an Iranian leader and Trump says, oh, yeah, well, we'll end the attacks, we'll guarantee your security, what the hell's that worth to you?
Well, of course, you talk about limitations on Iran's ballistic missiles, but most of their damage has been done by drones anyway.
Yeah.
Okay. And you see the United States, and they're launching these $1 million missiles. I don't know how much these missiles are. I've seen varying prices between $3 million and $10 million per missile to launch.
I think nowadays they're a little cheaper because the defense manufacturers are giving out volume discounts now, unfortunately, right?
Yeah, but they can't keep up, can they? They can't.
No.
America's burning through its missile stock so quickly on these 20,000 euro drones that Iran seems to be quite happy to let the United States just run down this missile stock. It's going to take years for the United States to build this back up. So when they talk about limitations on Iran's ballistic missiles, they're able to produce these drones on the cheap, where we're entering a different era of, asymmetric warfare and all that. And missiles are, seem to be so last year almost compared to the way drone technology is taking over everything.
Yeah, I think there's a little bit to that, but at the least, Iran wants those capabilities. The fact that it has been able to strike other countries in the region with missiles, not just drones, I think it's been a part of its strategy, quite obviously, from the jump. And as we've discussed before, it was something that people who understood Iran said publicly before this started that Iran was going to do that. And the Trump administration, according to Donald Trump himself in public, never expected that to happen. We have a lot of reporting that Trump wants this done. There was a very well-sourced, if anonymously sourced report in the Wall Street Journal on Wednesday. He's telling his aides he still wants this to be a multi-week thing. But, if you say, okay, let's get a negotiated agreement here, it's close to impossible to even come up with a hypothetical agreement that either side would even have a discussion about.
Yeah.
Who's giving up what here? Both sides seem to have things that they literally can't give up.
Right, because they're talking about this, summit, and the Vance is going to come over to Pakistan to meet them or somewhere else. In diplomatic terms, trying to end this thing is very, very tricky. You don't do it over in the space of 5 days, the last 5 days, what Trump was trying to do.
Right.
It's too hard. And there's too many red lines. There's too many red lines for Iran to kind of agree to. And they keep saying, we're not talking to Trump. Trump keeps coming out saying that, we're talking to Iran. They're giving us presents. They're giving us great presents.
Yeah.
Nobody knows exactly what that was.
Well, it came out what the present was. The Iranians led a few ships through the strait.
Yeah, but they charge him $2 million per tanker, didn't they?
Yeah.
That's some shakedown, as you call it.
It's a gesture of goodwill.
Yeah, and I think this is a long, long way to go. Now, Trump in the press conference this afternoon claimed that Iran shot missiles at Ireland. Okay?
Yeah, I imagine there are a few people watching the news in Dublin who did a double take there.
Yes, I had to go onto the roof of the office with binoculars and, make sure I get a selfie with one coming in to crash land in Kildare Street. He immediately corrected himself, though. Not before everybody went, oh, my God. Yeah. And I think he meant Diego Garcia. Yeah,
he said Ireland instead of island. They tried to shoot at the Ireland they wouldn't give us.
Yes.
Because the sentence, even its correct form, didn't make a whole lot of sense. Everyone's confusion lasted a little bit longer than it needed to, I think. But
yes, but the whole of Ireland, they got up on their hind legs like Merrickets to look up at the sky to see missiles dropping on us. So there you go.
It can end quickly if Trump chooses to end it quickly.
But
he's going to have to give up things that, that's just sort of the impasse here. Again, like any deal that Trump can blast to his supporters as a win, by definition, has to contain things that Iran won't do. Right? I mean, he can't have them do nothing with the nuclear program. He can't have them not pull back on funding Hezbollah or things like that. There's just a lot of things that he needs to call to win that Iran, again, it's not even really a matter of leverage or who's winning the war. The regime is basically going to go like, I'm not doing this because if I do this, I'm going to die. So I might as well just take my chances, right? We can't just leave ourselves sitting there. So if Trump really wants this to be a 6-week thing, I mean, it's going to have to be him just swallowing things that his entire base has said were key priorities. And let's be clear, the one thing that we should point out, any of his supporters who have come out in the last few weeks and made this argument against people against the war, oh, you don't really care about the Iranian people. Your Trump derangement syndrome is so severe that you would rather root for a dictator. I got news for you. Trump doesn't give two shits about the Iranian people. And it's very clear right now. You can tell that from the reporting. You can tell that by the way he's talking about things. It's really notable that in that 15-point plan, there's no regime change.
No.
Which supposedly was supposed to be part of the goal and supposed to be one of the really good things that came out of this, right? Oh, we're going to get this horrible theocracy out and allow the Iranian people self-determination and freedom. We've already ceded that. But Trump is going to have to cede things around the nuclear program. I mean, they gave like 18 different reasons why we started this in the first place. And I think the horrible irony is like, you can't even pick one and be like, oh, well, we can get that. We can't get anything around the nuclear. We can't get regime change. We can't get them to stop funding. They're not going to accept limitations on their defense. Again, whatever we offer them, they are probably with some validity going to say, what is this worth? What is the security guarantee from Donald Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu worth? We got a security guarantee last year.
No matter what Trump wants, he has to factor in Israel also.
Yeah.
Okay. And whatever they want, may not align with what Trump wants.
Right.
Now, Israel are quite firmly in the camp of regime change. And the Iranians know this. Also, even if this stops in the morning, okay, say Trump stops bombing them the whole lot, Israel stops bombing them the whole lot, there's still no roadmap going forward because they're not going to be able to agree on the fundamental issues. And that's why I think, even as of Thursday, 5:30 West Cork time, Iran are still hitting targets.
Yeah.
Okay. So this is a way to go. This is a long way to go. And I keep repeating myself by saying that, but I don't think even if America stopped bombing them in the morning, that Iran is going to give up its leverage on the Strait of Hormuz. And I think it's probably going to involve boots in the ground. But before we go to boots on the ground, what kicked off this recent round of, Taco Trump was a post on Truth Social, his social media app, on Monday. And what followed was a confluence of events that a lot of oil traders, or a oil trader, depending on who you talk to, made a lot of money about 15 minutes before Trump put out that post.
Right.
Now, do you, as the finance guy, want to explain to me what happened, and to our listeners, what exactly happened here?
Basically, there's a ton of money that went into the crude oil futures market. And a futures market is exactly what it sounds like. It is a contract that allows you to buy or sell the underlying commodity at some point in the future. In this case, it's crude oil. The short version of the story is that there was very suspicious and very heavy trading in the crude market just before Trump made that post. And at the same time, there was some relatively heavy and relatively suspicious trading in the stock market futures market. When you saw that post that he's trying to de-escalate the war, you don't have to have a lot of experience in the markets to think, okay, well, once he says that, the price of oil is going to go down and U.S. stocks are going to go up. And so it does seem to a lot of outside observers awfully, awfully suspicious that literally minutes before he makes this post, there's a flood of money going into trades that are basically short oil and long stocks. Those are exactly the two trades that you would make if you had information on what Trump was about to post.
Yes, traders made bets of worth $500 million in the oil market 15 minutes before Trump was touting his productive talks.
Right.
That the Iranians came out with 10 minutes later and said, we're not having any talks. We have no idea what you're talking about. Now, it's not known whether it was one entity or several entities, as far as I can tell what the news was telling me. It triggered a sharp sell-off in the global energy market, and it just drove everything haywire. But a White House spokesperson said the only focus of President Trump and the Trump administration is officials doing what's best for the American people. Okay? Now, I'm not a financial expert, Vincent. And for me, at the outside looking in, there's a pattern here. All through his presidency, he's made posts on Truth Social, and they seem to directly manipulate markets. And somebody on the inside always appears to have inside information and is making a lot of money. Now, me with my political analyst hat on, right, would seem to suggest to me that they are gambling with American service people's lives. All right? There's somebody close to Trump actively gambling while American men and women are in harm's way. And if it gets out into the wild and people grab it by the neck and start shaking it to see what exactly is going on, I think Trump could find himself in serious trouble here. Because it's one thing grifting in the White House, making a few bob, making a few billion on the side, but it's another thing gambling with American soldiers' lives, isn't it?
Yeah, I think that's true. I think that's why the discussion around these trades has been a big deal. And like you said, it is part of a pattern. We've seen suspicious trades on poly market, the prediction market ahead of the strikes in Venezuela, and I think the first strikes in Iran as well. I would make a couple points here, though. One, I don't believe at all that Trump is directly involved in this. I don't think it makes any sense. Trump can make, $50 million kind of anytime he wants. I don't think he would take that kind of risk. The other thing I'd point out is the crude oil futures market, particularly in size, is not something that you can trade just as a person, even as a very rich person. If you're worth 150 million, it still doesn't mean you can call up your private wealth manager and put on a 9-figure trade in the crude market. So in that context, there are two reasons for caution. And the first is that there are a lot of big trades in the oil futures markets every year. And sometimes they just may line up with this stuff. I think we do have enough of a pattern with Trump that you probably can't say that, but that's worth keeping in mind. The other thing, though, too, like people go, oh, this is Trump's people. We've talked about this before. The one thing we know about this administration is that they cannot shut up.
Yeah.
No one in this administration can keep a secret. We talked about that Susie Wiles profile. Trump's out there going, fake news, fake news. His chief of staff gave 13 interviews over 8 months. Everyone in this administration is taking pictures for, these people love this shit. They love talking about it. To me, that it's just as easily possible that there is a formal or informal network of somebody who's not that high up, who knows somebody whose father knows somebody who's a big deal and can really move money. I get the idea that it looks horrible. And I think people go, oh, it must be an insider because who would know Trump's going to post this, especially so soon ahead of time. I think the answer is a lot of people know a lot of about this White House pretty quick because these people they're texting reporters. I'm sure they're texting their buddies. I'm sure there are anonymous Reddit users, who are actually 33-year-old guys with pretty substantial positions in the energy department who are probably anonymously disclosing classified information and knowing the Trump administration, probably making vaguely racist posts too. But I'm not ready to get on board with the idea that's a massive conspiracy at the top. I think it's much more likely that this is just a case of how leaky these people are. But I could be wrong.
I'm going to push back, Vincent.
Okay.
And say that I think all through Trump's life, he's all these businesses and he doesn't seem to run them himself, right? They're offloaded, Trump casinos, Trump steaks, Trump with college. Was there Trump University at one stage? Yeah, Trump University was his essentially imaginary real estate training program that got shut down. Yep. Yeah, and they're all wheezes concocted generally by business partners, and he just takes a cut of the money, Yeah. To that point, it's kind of interesting in the context of this discussion. He very famously tried to license his name to a project in Azerbaijan, which it came out later. The project was heavily linked to the Revolutionary Guards of Iran. Yeah. And so where I'm going here is that Financial Times said this was abnormal. Yeah. Bloomberg said it was unprecedented. Even the Speaker of Iran's parliament came out 10 minutes later. It was literally 10 minutes later. He said there's no negotiations going on between Washington and Tehran. He said it's fake news being used to manipulate the financial and oil markets to escape the quagmire in which US and Israel are trapped in. And you're probably right, Trump had no direct involvement with this. But was Kushner in the room while he was, drafting the post? Or was Woodcock or was somebody else, Or did somebody get a heads up from somebody who was? Yeah. Yeah, exactly. All completely reasonable questions, for sure. The grift, as they call it, what I call it massive embezzlement, massive corruption, has got so bad that it's become almost normalized. If I say to you, if I text you later, I go, look at this, Vince, what's this? You're going to say to me, that's Trump doing Trump stuff. But let me get into something here now. Politicians in the United States trading the stock market with insider information is rife, isn't it? No. It's not rife? No, I was actually going to bring this up before. It's funny that you brought that up. I wrote a piece that was way, way, way too long on this last year. To be clear, I'm in a very small minority of people who believe this, but I actually don't think that Congress people do that on the regular basis. There was a guy, a senator from North Carolina named Richard Burr, who went into a national security briefing on the coronavirus pandemic in late January 2020, classified briefing, came out, sold every stock that he owned. Yes. Called his brother, I believe it was his brother-in-law, I may be getting the relative mix up, but called someone very close to him. That person sold every stock they owned. And he was never actually charged, believe it or not. The famous one is Nancy Pelosi, who was a Speaker of the House, a Democrat for a long time. And her husband has long been a pretty effective stock trader. And people go, oh, she's doing it because they have inside information. And then you look at all the stocks he owns. He owns, Alphabet and Meta and all these tech companies because they're based out of San Francisco. And those companies are literally so big that there's no such thing as inside information that you could trade on. So I actually think it's mostly an issue created by social media because it's very easy to go, oh, look at this trade. This congressperson, bought this stock and it's up 150% over last year. Like they're making thousands and thousands of trades. I actually just don't think that there's any evidence of it.
Now, the irony is they all know this stuff because the law is that they have to disclose all their trades. So you could say, well, if they were doing this, they wouldn't be disclosing it. But the idea that all these guys are just getting rich, I think, is largely a social media fiction more than anything else.
Well, I'm going to push back again. I'm pushing back a lot against you today, Vincent.
Yeah.
There's some data out there about people's family, Congress people's family, family members trading, making unusual trades and that kind of thing. And I think Rahm Emanuel came out recently and said, we need to regulate these poly markets. We need to stop politicians from, what they're calling insider trading. They're having a look at defense appropriation budgets, then going out investing in defense stocks is the claim Rahm Emanuel is making. I think he's might be tipping his hat for the presidency next time. But I think there's a movement there at the moment in the United States to kind of regulate this, get a tighter handle on it.
Well, there is absolutely a movement. I mean, it's one of the very few issues that gets bipartisan support. We already put in a law. I mean, it is illegal to trade on insider information as a congressperson now. The movement now is actually just to not let them trade stocks at all. The problem with this idea of it being insider trading is that the only information that would really be that valuable enough that you could actually make a ton of money would make it so obvious. So, for instance, maybe if you're a congressperson and you have contacts in the DOD and you know what company they're going to pick for a major contract. Now, again, you're a congressperson. Congress doesn't pass laws that generally favor companies over another. And we've talked about defense spending. There's no defense bill that's going to be a surprise to anybody. Oh, well, yeah, we're writing a bill. Defense spending's up another $120 gazillion. Yeah, I'll go buy stocks. I could have done that too because I knew exactly what was going to happen. I get why it makes sense, but it is one of those things you look closely. That's not how Congress works. They just don't really have to create policies that have quite that kind of impact. I think it's an easy thing to go on Twitter and build an account. And there are a couple of people who've done that. And there are people who sell services now. They sell Congress people picks, so you can supposedly track them and beat the markets. But if you look at their numbers, they barely beat the market, and it makes sense why they would beat the market for reasons that go beyond insider trading.
Okay, well, that's me slapped down anyway.
Well, I could be wrong. I'm very much in the minority here, and I'm always kind of like an institutionalist, and I always get in these arguments where I go, I don't really think this is happening, and people go, oh, you're just naive. You're too old to be this naive. The world's a terrible place. You just want to believe everybody's following the rules. So it's very much plausible that I'm missing it. The only thing I would say is I think if it is rife, it's probably not the trades that they're disclosing that these Twitter people are trying to sell you for $100 a year. So look, at the end of the day too, you know this better than anybody. Politics is as much perception as reality. So if people believe that Congress people are insider trading, they're going to react. If people believe that high level people in the Trump administration are profiting off the sacrifices of American service member, they're going to respond to that too. So,
yeah, I actually suspect very strongly that's what's going on with the Trump administration at the moment. They're profiting off the backs of U.S. service people. Now, I mentioned Rahm Emanuel earlier, a Democratic big brain strategist. He said Trump has lost the American people. And you know what else Trump has lost?
What's that?
He lost his own constituency, as we would call it in Ireland, Mar-a-Lago, to a Democrat.
Yep. Special election for the Florida State House. Yep.
Now, what's a special election, Vincent?
It's basically just an election that happens outside the regular calendar. So it can happen if somebody passes away. It more often happens because somebody gets appointed to a different position.
Yes, of course. In Ireland, we call them by-elections, Vincent, and we have two coming up also.
Okay.
So we are going to have a guest on for that to talk us all about by-elections in Ireland. In America, you call them special elections. Okay. So this was a big swing.
Huge. Yeah.
She won by only 2%, which is not a whole lot, but it's enough. But it was a 21-point swing, was it?
Yeah.
Now, that's in Trump's own back garden.
Literally.
It's literally in Mar-a-Lago territory, with the alligators and the golf and all that. And if that's happening in his own back garden, what is the potential for it to happen nationwide come the midterms in November?
Well, I think that's why Democrats are high-fiving and celebrating this week. Because they've had a pretty good string. We talked about what we call off-year elections in November, where they won the governorships in New Jersey and Virginia. And I kind of said, all right, let's pump the brakes a little bit. There's always weird dynamics at play. For instance, Democrats put a lot of money into this race, into a race that if it was, 2 counties over, no one in the country would even know it happened. No one in the country would even care. There would have been like $800 in contributions from the local doctor and like 3 bake sales to fund. There's a couple $100,000 that went into this election, at least from
couple of $100,000 into what we would call a by-election for the state legislature.
Yeah,
Right. How much money are we talking about here, Vincent?
More than $1 million, believe it or not.
What?
In cash and support. Yeah, it's according to an article the day before. The Democrat had raised over 200,000, and then there, as always, political action committees got in the fund and everything. So the Democrats obviously really wanted this because of the symbolism. We're not talking about this if it's Florida District 83 instead of 87 or whatever.
She seems to be a very impressive lady. Emily Gregory is her name. She works. She's a fitness instructor. Never ran for office before, and got $1 million behind her to win. Okay. Now, there was another reason I read why Trump might have lost that seat in his own back garden. Okay. Apparently, Trump's neighbors hate him.
Oh yeah, I don't doubt that. Yeah. I mean, it's true of his neighbors in Europe. Why wouldn't it be true of his neighbors in Florida, right?
Yeah. They hate him in Clare as well. Apparently, residents and local authorities have been clashing with Trump over Mar-a-Lago for a long time now. Going all the way back to 2006, something got to do with a flagpole, an 80-foot flagpole, apparently, which led to a lawsuit, of course, and mainly because of the ongoing concerns about traffic, helicopter noise, security disruptions, all that jazz. So it seems like they hate him, but she still only won by 2%. So, yeah, Trump is that one neighbor everybody dislikes.
If you could get a Republican here, they might make that precisely that point, It's really annoying to live where the President of the United States lives. That's not unique to Donald Trump. If you're still getting 47% of the vote or whatever he got, that actually might be better news for you than you might think. So,
do you think it's plausible that there could be that much of a swing nationwide in the midterms?
It's tough, man. Like this point, there just aren't 20% of Americans who are going to change their mind on anything. I really can't see how you do like 20 points. I mean, even something like 6, 8 is massive in the context of the American electorate. And that's all the more true when you're kind of talking about midterm elections where turnout is a lot lower. So it's skewed much more to people who either pay close attention or who take it really seriously or who are really vested in the process. And those people are by definition less likely to change their minds. Like we know that like Trump has hemorrhaged support among younger voters. He did really, really well among young voters for a Republican, particularly young men. We know he's just bled that support. But you could also go, well, how many 23-year-olds vote in midterms? I'd love to sit and tell you I did. I even though I was 23, I made sure to do my civic duty, but that would be a bald-faced lie. So
yeah, even somebody as entrenched in the political system as I am, I mean, to some days I couldn't be. I'm not voting for that. No. I mean, yeah. Now, Vincent, Florida, it's a big state, isn't it? It's a massive state. How much is the governor paid every year? What's the salary?
I don't know that one offhand, but governors here oddly don't make a lot of money. The highest paid governor, I'm pretty sure, is in New York. I think her salary is something like $250,000.
The governor of New York?
Yeah. Governor of New York State, obviously, yeah.
New York State, sorry. What's the population in New York?
New York State's got to be like 20 million, something like that.
And she only gets paid $250,000.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Do you know how much the president of the United States makes?
Is it something like 400 or something?
Yeah, it's 400. Yeah.
That was a good guess.
Trump always makes a big deal about the fact, which to his credit is true, that he's never taken that salary. He gives it away.
Okay, yeah, but he's making a lot more otherwise. But I talk about this, Vincent, because we have a housing problem in Ireland. We have a housing crisis, okay?
Right.
And our Minister for Housing, James Brown, has been begging with local authorities, what we call the county councils, your equivalent to states in the United States, okay? Okay, so I was looking into this, and the chief executive of Dublin City Council earns €236,000 a year.
Okay.
Large enough population by any standards, but you know the geography of Ireland pretty well.
Mm-hmm.
Have you been to Leitrim?
No, actually, I've not.
No, I've never met anybody that's been to Leitrim either. But the population is 35,000 people, okay? 35,000 people.
Wait, there's 35,000 people in the entire county?
In the entire county, yes. And they're the equivalent to states in the United States, obviously, okay? He's paid €163,000.
Okay. Yeah, so that's close to, it's about what, $190,000 right now?
Very well
like
said.
that, yeah.
The Prime Minister of Spain, okay, earns €90,000 a year. That the population is 50 million people or something mad like that, okay? And the reason I say this is because these people are being paid the salaries of prime ministers and presidents, and the Minister for Housing is asking them to zone some land, and to alleviate the housing crisis, and only 2 councils have got back to him with concrete plans to rezone lands, and everybody else has just ignored him.
Now, are they ignoring them for political reasons, or it's just kind of making €163,000 a year doesn't mean I'm supposed to work hard enough to come up with these complex plans?
I'm sure they do work hard enough in some cases, but I just find it staggering that we are paying salaries in terms of prime ministers and presidents across Europe and the United States, the governors of massive states. And these are minuscule little places, small little bureaucratic fiefdoms, and they're being paid incredible salaries, and they're not delivering on the very, very basics. We have a housing crisis in Ireland, and they don't seem to be getting their finger out to provide the most basic services that are needed. Does that seem an extraordinary amount of money to pay somebody for a country the size of Ireland? For a country the size of Ireland, do you think that's an extraordinary amount of money?
Less the size of the country as much the size of the county. Like, I can see it being national news if a mayor of some 35,000 person city, in North Carolina was making $190,000 a year. You can kind of see that going viral all of a sudden or something like that. It's not the size of the country as much as it is just, 35,000 people are supporting that salary plus benefits. Like, but they're each paying like $6 a year. Like, that's a lot of money for.
Yeah, they're each price of a cup of coffee to the county manager.
Yeah.
And these guys are unelected. We inherit these guys. They're appointed. They're not elected to anything.
Who are they appointed by?
Central government, essentially. There's a what you would call an interview board and all that kind of stuff for the civil service, and they decide and they make the recommendations, and the minister just signs off on it. They're not accountable.
To stretch your analogy, this is if the governor of North Carolina was appointed by Donald Trump and by some committee that was part of the executive branch of the federal government, basically.
Yes. Yeah.
That's bananas. Huh.
And these guys drive everybody mad. They drive politicians mad. They drive journalists mad. It's very hard to get any information about what goes on in these local fiefs. It's they're like feudal lords, but they're compensated like they're compensated, as I said, like presidents and prime ministers and all that.
Yeah,
and
it is wild. I mean, it's surprising. It didn't occur to me that would be the structure. But yeah, it does seem like it's kind of a structure that's just ripe for abuse when you don't have that accountability. It is kind of ironic, though, because in the U.S., when people are in those positions and people get upset about what they're doing, quite often it's because they're kind of doing too much. There's very few bureaucrats here who people are getting pissed off for them holding things up. It's more like, oh, that land was designated as a nature preserve, and then in the dead of night, the county board voted to sell it to a developer for $20. Here, it's usually more in the direction of quote unquote progress, as opposed to there where it sounds like it's just a matter of things not getting done enough.
Look, I have a suggestion that might fix the democratic deficit in Ireland and might get the planning and zoning and housing built for once. And that's, we should swap some of our county managers for some world leaders. Get that guy over from Spain, have the Scandinavian model. The Prime Minister of Norway, he only earns €180,000 a year. But he's in charge of overseeing the world's largest wealth fund of $2 trillion.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, get that guy in here. Come over here, pal. The Scandinavian model, here we come. I know you hear left-wing people talk about the Scandinavian model all the time. That's the Scandinavian model I can buy into. Let's get rid of somebody. Let's get rid of some of these county managers and replace them with some world leaders. We'd pay them the right price. These guys would be taking a pay raise to come over here and help Ireland. So
I imagine, yeah. Last thing I'll say to Irish listeners, though, is sometimes you want to be careful what you wish for. The town that I live in, we had a mayoral election in November. Our mayor had been in office for 24 years. She got 23% of the vote because basically everybody running for the city council and the person running against her was furious that we had basically overdeveloped our town.
Okay.
And we have so much traffic and so much noise and so many issues from that basically everybody running against her ran on a principle of just, we're not building anything anymore. We're done here.
Okay, fair enough. Well, unfortunately, Ireland has a terrible housing crisis, Vincent. So if you ever have to escape the United States, you might find you have to come to Ireland. You have nowhere to stay. But I can put you up in I can put you up in the tree house or in the shed in the back garden if you're that stuck.
No, as long as it's Ireland, I could give two.
Okay, what have we coming up next, Vincent?
I have no idea. I think it's going to depend on what Donald Trump does, right? But
yes.
Yeah, we've got...
The podcast industrial complex is enthralled to one man's narcissism.
It really is, man. It's really going to be wild in 2029 when like 85% of the political podcasts just collapse. Because they're talking about special elections in Florida, but only this time nobody gives a shit, right?
We are going to ask our listeners, do they have any questions for us?
Yeah, do a little mailbag episode, right?
Yeah, come into us on our Substack or our X account or any of our social medias. You can go to our website, atlantic-current.com, and drop us a message. And we'll see if we can answer your questions wittily and, more importantly, honestly. Isn't that right?
The first one is more important, actually.
Yes.
I'd rather be funny and lying than honest and boring. Come on.
Yes, better to be funny and interesting than, tell the truth, I suppose. As some politicians will tell you anyway.
I was just going to say, this is a political podcast. We cannot deny that it's any other way.
Of course. Well, I'm Tull from the Irish Politics Newsletter.
And I'm Vince Martin from Wall Street in Maine.
Thank you so much for listening. Bye-bye.
Bye now.